I'm happy to introduce this program highlighting the book Contemplation, a collection of city congregation member writings. When the project was first conceived, I volunteered to be a liaison between the TCC board and the project. In reporting to the board each month on the progress of the book, I got an insider's view of how a book comes together, from concept to editing to shipping. We even had to devise an in-person delivery plan required by COVID restrictions that limited our ability to meet as a group and simply hand out the books. It was an interesting process and a testament to the efficient collaboration between Rabbi Peter and the two editors, Carol Sternhell and Ernie Rubinstein. As a 20-year member who has worn many hats over those 2 decades, I appreciate having this moment to pause and consider what TCC has meant to me. I am grateful that Myrna Baron took the audacious step 30 years ago to create one more Jewish congregation in New York City. I'm guessing that no one in that small group, which met in people's living rooms, would have imagined that 30 years later we were being led by our second paid rabbi, had a steady membership, a capable board of directors, and presided over 130 bar-mitzvahs. These accomplishments attest to the power of community formed by like-minded people who want to honor their heritage while staying true to their secular values. I experienced great relief when I discovered TCC, especially because I wanted to raise my children with the Jewish education I believed in. Finding others who felt the same way and a structure in place with a liturgy I could say aloud and a curriculum that challenged my children to think critically while learning about our heritage was a gift to me. I made important friendships that mean so much to me and was offered an opportunity to grow via my many different leadership roles. The voices in this collection represent that community, for which I am truly grateful. Gratitude is also due to Carol and Ernie. They are organized and purposeful and took on the daunting tasks of reaching the authors of the essays, securing their permission, suggesting updates and minor edits, researching printers, and masterminding a truly creative and inspired delivery strategy. In my longest and still ongoing stint at TCC, running the bar-mitzvah program, I've worked very closely with Rabbi Peter. Over our many years of collaboration, I came to understand just how committed and prolific a rabbi could be. The flow of ideas for writings, projects, new community service, and social actions, and identifying and cultivating leaders was impressive. His writings in this collection represent almost 25 years of responding to world events, as well as his congregants' lives from a warm and humanistic perspective. Rabbi Peter has touched the lives of so many people, sometimes through his interactions around the original writing of these essays. His talents and abilities contributed to our strength and cohesion, which enabled us to weather his retirement successfully. Knowing and working with Rabbi Peter has enriched the lives of so many. He is a keystone upon which TCC is built. We will hear from him next, and then Carol and Ernie will share some observations on their experiences working on the book. And finally, a few contributors will talk about their writing. So Peter, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you everyone for joining us. Shabbat Shalom. It gives me a great pleasure to be here with all of you this evening. When I retired 4 years ago, I had a number of items on my to-do list. Several involved working on family history, a topic that has engaged me for a long time, and I hope to have a book soon to show for it. Another project focused on my revised version of Bible stories that I began years ago for kids' school. There was one other idea that I also had hoped to bring to fruition for many years, and that was this volume of Contemplation. I knew right away, before these talks were even delivered, how vital they would be to the congregation. The conversations that these presentations engendered, not to mention the well-deserved applause, made it clear to all of us how important these talks have been. As one person wrote me, this book represents more than anything else exactly who we are as a community. Someone else said that the members' stories are a large part of what makes city congregations so unique, and this collection serves as a testament to that. I randomly open the book and am immediately drawn into someone's specific experience. It's like a quilt of our congregation. Another shared that after reading just a few of the entries, what struck him was the thought of how privileged he was to know so many utterly remarkable people through his association with a similarly remarkable city congregation. Every time I pick it up, he said, I learned something extraordinary about someone I have had the good fortune to know. A former member wrote to me after he had finished the book. It has been a morning companion for me for over the last 3 weeks, and it has been great to hear again talks that I listened to 10 to 15 years ago and read things I never heard before. Another comment came from a woman who said that she was impressed with the depth of sharing of beautiful experiences, many of which were difficult and painful. She said, I feel that I know some of my fellow congregants far better than ever before by reading their stories. In my introduction, I wrote that these assignments were not always easy. They often required honest soul searching that most of us do not regularly indulge in. For this reason alone, I felt that the speakers had a unique opportunity for their own personal growth, and I was privileged to nurture that process. It goes without saying, but we must say it, that we are indebted to our members who stepped forward and shared their personal stories and points of view. The congregation is stronger because of them. As they enriched themselves, they also enriched us. For a period of time, we posted some of these talks on our website. It was a good way to let newcomers know who we were. But I always felt that this was limiting, and the audience was just as valuably our own members who might want to revisit these beautiful gems. I know that our lives have significantly moved online. Our communications have become paperless, and it is handy to listen to books on Kindle or Audible. But I believe there is no experience like holding a book and reading it the old-fashioned way. As one person put it, books are so important, particularly hard-covered ones. Many of you remarked how beautiful the book is. I agree. I'll also admit that I did not have a vision at the outset of what the book would look like. I have Carol Sternhell and Ernie Rubinstein to thank for having that vision of how to make a beautiful book and for their hours and hours of work to bring the book forth. The layout and design are not incidental, nor is the use of artwork and photography. All these elements enhance the beauty of the book. As one person observed, this is a masterpiece coffee table conversation piece. And finally, I'll end with one more commendation, which particularly delighted me. This person said, it looks like a book I would have been given at my bar mitzvah, although unlike those, this one I have an interest in reading. I hope that you too will dig into this collection over and over again, and it will provide hours of inspiration and contemplation, not to mention fruitful and productive ongoing conversation. And now we'll hear from Carol and Ernie.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So like Isabel, I've been a member for a long time, I think somewhere between 20 and 25 years, and also joined because I was looking for a place for my son to become Jewish without me having to say any words I didn't believe. And I wrote about this in my intro, I won't repeat it. But so we sort of wandered in all those years ago when he was 4 to a potluck dinner. The service was the first Jewish service I'd heard that I could say the words for. And even as I wrote, he had this little section on parents and children. And as like a, middle-aged single mother already back then, that was incredibly moving. So I've been in the congregation, done a bunch of different things over the years. When Peter asked me to do this project, which was in like December of 2020, I said yes because Peter asked me. I didn't say yes because I wanted to do a book. And I didn't say yes because I thought all these talks were great either. But it's been an amazing experience. And let me say a few things about what we did in the book that I'm proud of. You've seen the book. One of the things I like best about it is that Ernie and I gave it this eclectic structure that you'll see. Because you could have done a book like this, just collating all the high holiday talks chronologically, and similarly with the panel talks. Peter had all the high holiday talks, but I had the panel talks because I did about 10 different panels. Many of you were part of them, the This I Believes and Jewish Journey and Jews and Money. So we had all this stuff, and we could have just put it together as it was originally delivered, but we thought that would be boring. And I'm really happy with the way we set the talks up in conversation with each other. Some of them are short and funny, others are long and serious. So you'll see, and maybe Ernie will talk about this a little too. We have the first part of the book is themes, and the second part, like the music idea of variations, but it's conversations. So they tend to be shorter and quirkier. And I'm also really pleased that we put in all this art, which, as we've said, it's not, so I had worked on the Shabbat service that you did tonight for it was redone by the liturgy committee headed by Carol Melman, but based on our old liturgy done by Peter and Myrna and other people from the early years. And I worked on that one with Sue Rapp. But what we did there was make it look beautiful and put in art. We didn't decide on the content. And then I worked with Ernie on the High Holiday book. So these have been a progression. This one we started from scratch with and figured out how to put all the pieces together. Okay, so this is what I was starting to say. With the original book, the Shabbat book, we got the art from professional artists, usually whom we had to pay. The art in this book is all by members or former members or people who are, like, as we wrote, loved ones of members. So it's a really homemade book. That's what I wanted to say about that. And the other thing is, well, I did this because Peter asked, and I'm the one who brought Ernie in because I had worked with him before, and I'm going to turn it over to him in a minute. But I don't think one of us could have done this alone. It was a discussion project in, sort of every step of the way. And I'm very happy with how many voices are here. One other thing I just want to say, because no one ever mentions this, like Isabel talked about the delivery system, which was most of us driving around handing people books. But there's another part of this, which is proofreading. And for those of you who ever do that, I want to take some credit for, so far, I haven't found a typo. There might be one, but I think between us, Ernie and I proofread this book 100 times. And if you've ever done proofreading, you sort of have to do it letter by letter, comma by comma, semicolon by semicolon. Make sure, if you transliterate a Hebrew phrase one way in one chapter, you have it, you know what I'm saying. So anyway, this book was a labor of love, as Ernie kept saying whenever I complained. Labor of love. I'm going to turn it over to Ernie, who is a wonderful human being to work on a project with.
Thank you, Carol. Thanks for those comments and Peter's as well. What I have to say really are just three things that are spins on what Peter and Carol have already said. I'd like to thank all of you who have written to us to comment on the book. And one of the words that many use in describing it is to say that it is beautiful. And I want to credit the person who was most responsible for the beauty of the book, who is Carol. Carol held the book to a very high standard of beauty from the very beginning. That includes the art in it, the design of it, and especially the binding of it. We learned by trial and error the kind of binding we needed, which is called a Smythe sewn binding. And if you look at the binding, you can see that the pages are gathered in signatures. And here I'll just send out a shout out to Dan and Sue Rapp for pointing us to the binder who really came through for us in the end. So between that and the dark blue pages at the beginning and end, and the bookmark and the cover. I hope that everyone who has the book will enjoy the beauty of it. Secondly, the editing of it that Carol also spoke about. We did very light editing on the essays, but we did read the essays many times over for the proofreading. And as a result of that, we in effect internalized the essays. And one effect of that on me was to help me feel closer to the members I already know, but also to the former members who I only know through their writing. And it's especially nice to see some former members here. So my hope is that for all readers, for current members, that they'll feel closer to other members through looking at this book, that former members will have good memories stimulated by looking at it, and that non-members, if they acquire a copy, might even consider joining the congregation. And my last comment is on the content of the essays themselves, which Carol also alluded to. There are many different viewpoints presented in the essays. For example, some writers celebrate their parents and other writers criticize their parents. Some writers celebrate the idea of inheritance and legacy, and other writers question those ideas. Even though this is a book of humanist thoughts, there are essays in the book that even question some of the basic tenets of humanism. For example, under the heading of skepticism, we're invited to adopt a skeptical attitude towards humanism itself. And under the heading of wondrous strange, we have essays that ask us to consider whether there might be more things in heaven and earth than are dreamed of in our philosophy or that are dreamed of in our humanism. So the viewpoints are very broad. And so I guess in sum, I would just say that I hope everybody who acquires the book appreciates and enjoys the beauty of it, the intimacy of it, and the variety of views expressed in it. So that's all from me. Carol, back to you.
Okay, now we're going to hear from 5 of the contributors. Just going to speak for a few minutes each about their experience, and then we're going to open it up for comments, conversation. So the first speaker is going to be Myrna Baron, who you've heard about already, the founder of our congregation. Her piece in the book is about loss. It's called In Memory Do They Live? And it's from Yom Kippur, 1998. I believe that's the oldest piece we have in the book. It's not like the first one that ever existed, but some of the very early years got lost or we couldn't reach the person. But so this is historically, I believe, the first piece we have in the book. And Myrna?
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So this evening is a wonderful celebration, and I think this collection of talks beautifully represents the congregation's values. It's really a treasure for ourselves and to share with our children and our larger families. As Carol said, my talk was among the earliest, but it is a heavy topic for tonight. That year when Peter asked me to speak about loss, it followed a year in which my grandmother and my sister-in-law died within months of each other. We were early in the congregation's experiment with our members' presentations on the high holidays. We think that it was the year prior that the congregation hit upon the model that we continue to use, with a discussion on Rosh Hashanah and the members' talks on Yom Kippur that we think about. So without much precedent, Gina Duclayan, Ann Schoenbrunn, and I took on this highly personal topic. My grandmother had been declining for many years. She was nearly 91 when she died. On the other hand, my sister-in-law, Sally, who I was related to through Blair's father, died from ovarian cancer at age 52. Blair was 8 at the time. For several years, we tried to prepare her for what was ahead. Would it have been easier for us to make up stories? Perhaps, but that would not have been consistent with our values. Blair would have seen through it, and later she would have questioned our honesty. From the beginning of the congregation, when Rabbi Peter, now my husband, was our volunteer rabbi, he empowered us to be active participants. He empowered us to participate in Rosh Hashanah discussions and these Yom Kippur talks. And he also tried to empower us to lead our own services, unless a legal officiant was required. In my talk, I reflected on the solace and empowerment I gained from adding our selections to the funeral home rabbi's service from my grandmother, and my mother's response by asking me to later assemble and lead my grandmother's unveiling service. One service led to another. As a result of my sharing this in the Yom Kippur talk, our friend Abe Mandel, Mickey's late husband and Lonnie's dad, asked me to lead his mother's memorial service. And later, my father requested, verbally and in his will, that I manage the detail of his funeral service. He said, "I know you'll leave out the BS." Writing that talk gave me the opportunity to further reflect on our values and how we discuss death with Blair. I still believe and I encourage people to be honest with themselves and their children. And I followed these humanistic teachings again with Oren, who was only 2.5 when my father died. When Oren, so little, asked, "Why is mommy crying?" I answered honestly and directly. And I said I was sad because my father died. No euphemisms. When he later asked, "When can we see Grandpa?" I told him, "Grandpa is always with us in our hearts." To me, there's nothing mystical or spiritual about it. Despite our protests to the contrary when we were younger, I see so much of our parents in my brothers and me. Their strength, their anxieties, and their resilience, from how we fix things to the way we've learned to cope. As we say, in memory do they live.
That was great. Our next speaker is Daniel Radish, who's talked about skepticism for Rosh Hashanah of 2008. But Daniel has another, stands out in another way here. I think he's the only family of 4 where everybody is represented in the book. So his wife, Gina Duplain, is in the book, and the kids, Milo and Margalit. So it's a very impressive family, and we're going to hear from Daniel.
Thank you. Yeah, it was such a wonderful experience getting hold of this book and getting to reread the essay that I, wrote in 2008, a long time ago, and of course looked at other people's. I wrote generally about how skepticism, I had always kind of considered the underpinning of my worldview. But it's not really a belief system in and of itself. And I wanted to think about, if we are humanists, what does it mean to be humanists, and what are the conditions beyond skepticism of religion and of traditions that are just handed down? What do we have to bring on top of that? What are the other conditions that are required of us? And I won't rehash the essay, but what I realized is that it was such a rare opportunity to think deeply about what I believe. I think that is something that we don't often have a chance to do. And I really realized, what that opportunity meant. And I think in a way we get it a little bit, every week at services, or every year at the high holidays, or whatever, whenever we engage with a group like the city congregation. But for me, that's what really stands out. It's interesting because it was a long time ago now. And one of the things that I kind of came to is that on top of skepticism, that what was also required of us is a form of humility. That, if we need to be firm in our beliefs, but also aware that, maybe there's more to the world than just our beliefs. And particularly that we need to engage with other people in a respectful way, and not just dismiss other people's ideas glibly, that even if something seems clearly wrong to us, that it can have value. I think I still believe that, but it has certainly become a lot harder over the last 12 years as the range of beliefs that are allowed in society has broadened on the edges. You certainly, when I expressed that, obviously I had profound disagreements with a lot of people that I would interact with, but nothing like what you hear today, where it is very much more challenging to say, there's something in what you're saying that has value to me, even if I disagree with it. Unfortunately, that seems less and less true for a variety of reasons. But that is definitely one thing that has kind of changed for me since working on this project. The other thing I want to say is just how, you mentioned that, the whole family, actually, we have one more child who does not have an essay in the book, but maybe in the next volume. But being in this book, along with, my whole family, and also so many of you who I've gotten to know over the years, I've been in this congregation for more than 20 years, and people that I, don't know, it is a real reminder of the importance of community, and also in itself an example of community. This is a kind of physical representation that we can all hold in our hands and say, this is not just people writing interesting things, although it's certainly that, but really this is us. This is, this is all of us bound between two covers, and, pressed together in ways that, both fit and maybe are uncomfortable, but that's what a community is. And so I really think that's what's most wonderful for me about this project is that it has done all that for us. So thank you all for putting it together.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Judith Schoolman, who has 4 pieces in the book, which there's a couple other people who do, but it's definitely, a record. I wrote them down. The Truth in My Backyard was from Jewish Journey, one of the panels in 2018. A Bagel and a Schmear was, or maybe that was from, what was that one from? Oh, that was from Jews and Money. And then You Don't Have to Say Everything You Think, which was from a panel I did called something like What I Wish I Had Known When I Was Younger. And Ashes was a Yom Kippur talk from 2014. So Judith.
First of all, Carol, you did more for me than just assign me these stories. For those of you who know me or don't know me, I've been a journalist, an observer, not a participant in the writing field almost my whole life. And as an observer, you stay out of it. You don't exist, you're the camera. And so this was really the first experience that I wrote about myself, because basically it's kind of called the Imposter Syndrome, where even though I won awards and fellowships and monetary things and plaques and all that kind of stuff, I didn't think, who the hell would want to read what I have to write? I mean, it's in the newspaper and then it's on the bottom of the birdcage, literally. But when Carol asked me to start doing this, I said, well, if she thinks I'm okay, all right, I'll do it, all right. And then she asked me again, all right, I'll do it. And while I agree with what Daniel and Myrna have said about, the community and all of that, for me, it's a very personal growth in that I'm still not convinced that what I have to say is of any value, but other people seem to think so. And I used my speeches as my application for the Master of Fine Arts program. Carol wrote a recommendation for me at City College, the only place I applied, and I got in. And apparently that's like a huge, big deal. I didn't even know that. And I am forced to write not only about what I observe, which I'm extremely good at apparently, but also what I live. And one of the questions that was asked was, how have you changed, and maybe what would you see differently? And the piece Ashes, I look at and I go, that's very naive, that's very childish, because it's oh so funny about my parents dying, and my father's ashes were in a box in the closet, and then then it snowed, and oh ha ha, it's hysterical. Over years, I have realized that this kind of humor masks the pain and the confusion and the inability to focus on the loss. It's so much easier to make a joke. And while I still think humor is a very basic part of my psyche, I would have rewritten it. And it would have been more nuanced. And I still am amazingly flattered that I was asked to contribute. And my fellow contributors, again, I met Ernie for the first time through this book, and the delivery system was great. We had a cup of coffee and we chatted like old friends for more than an hour until it got so cold sitting outside. I finally said, I gotta go home. But the quote from Sally Field came to my mind, and I don't want to sound like an idiot, but what the hell, where Sally Field said, you like me, you really like me, when she won the Academy Award. And that's kind of how I feel. You might not like me personally, but by being part of this book, I guess you liked what I had to say. So I just want to thank everybody, and good night. Thank you.
See, and even what you just said about the ashes piece shows why you're such a good writer at this sort of stuff. Right? I love your ashes piece, but the way you just thought it gave me something else to think about myself, because I like the humor, but maybe you're right. But anyway, that's exactly what's great about some of these pieces. I mean, is the way people really reflect on these questions. So our next speaker is Kevin Dahill Fuchel, if I'm saying it right, who has two excellent pieces on loss and legacy. The first, Loss, was at Rosh Hashanah 2012, and then the one on legacy was called Poppy, and was a little This I Believe piece from 2011. I'm very fond of that one. So Kevin.
Thank you, Carol, and thanks everyone. Yeah, I think there's so much that, going third in this order or fourth in this order is sort of, a little tough, because there's so much of what people have said that sort of connects and resonates with the experience of this. And for those people who are here who've had the experience, you probably know what I mean. And Helene, I envy you going last, but I appreciate seeing you and seeing everybody here. In particular, as I start sort of putting my thoughts together about being a part of this book, I'm looking onto the screen of all of the faces, and Peter, you just kind of jump out in a particular way, because that was such a huge piece of it for me. You are a incredible steward of people's ideas and thoughts, your editing, your gentle editorship and guidance of the pieces that I was involved in, as well as my children and their bar and bat mitzvahs, just stands out to me as something that is extraordinary to help create both in me a feeling of ability, but I think throughout the whole congregation, a word that maybe gets a little bit overused a lot, but kind of a feeling of safety, where the kind of vulnerability and exploration that I was allowed to do or encouraged to do felt very comfortable. And that's kind of the context when I think about my experience in this, is that, I was raised Catholic in a family that was extremely connected to the religious practices of Catholicism, of Roman Catholicism, and meeting Rachel and always having been sort of one eye over onto, well, what's happening with this Judeo-Christian ethic that I'm a part of, and what's this Judeo part, and finding Rachel and finding ways into a world where I could be comfortable, where we could be comfortable together for some of the reasons that everybody here said, but then not only be in that space, but then be invited to actually share part of myself, to bring these two pieces bring really deep parts of me. The piece on loss, really, and grief connected to both my work, which has been always been a sense that I wanted to always live a life where what I was participating in to contribute to the world was connected to the values and who I am and the experience of loss in my own life, but in sort of supporting others and this paper that I wrote in school about good grief. And that experience was just a real cherished part of myself that I didn't know that I was going to be comfortable or able or know how to bring out into a community that was not part of my work world. That I could share and feel a connection and a resonance and a purposefulness to that part of my life. And similarly with the essay on Poppy, who was my grandfather, and his, sort of easy and confident confrontation or lack of confrontation with the end of his life here, in my experience and engagement with him around that. And that's, for anybody who knows me, that individual, and I kind of get choked up even thinking about him, is in the deepest parts of my heart and the deepest parts of my personhood. And sharing that and being asked, Carol, to be a part of that and writing that and putting that forward was actually even a healing moment for me and a connection with my siblings who remain very connected to their Catholic religion and don't really understand why I don't, and at times question whether I am disloyal to, our family values. But in being able to write that and share that with them, and them seeing that, in fact, the people who are the heroes in all of our world were the heroes in mine as well, but being able to be expressed in a different way, kind of took something off and made it okay for them again with me, and in some ways helped maybe jar a little bit of a door open for Rachel as well. So that's part of my reflection on this experience. And the other part of it is, back to Peter and Rachel a little bit, also thinking about it now, again, who are the people in my life who've sort of who sort of opened these doors, who've made these parts of me better because I can express them. As I'm a clinical social worker in my work as well, I believe strongly in the power of narrative and what it means to be able to sort of have a voice and tell your story. And for people to have allowed that for me in a way that's just as genuine and, like, as I shared, as deep in me as I can imagine, is really, really special. And to know that this is now part of a book. The book is gorgeous. It is there. It is there for all of us in this congregation, but for all of us beyond that congregation. It's there for my children. It's there for family. God knows where this book is going to end up, however many generations down the line. But I think there'll always be a part of me in that, and that just, it's hard to sort of conceptualize, but I feel it deeply, and I'm deeply appreciative and grateful to be a part of this. And thank you, Peter. Thank you, Carol, and everyone for this opportunity.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm finding people's comments really interesting and moving. Our last speaker, and then everyone will get to speak if they want to, is Helene Laufer. Also spoke about loss. That's often a topic at our Yom Kippurs. I guess this was from 2012, The Loss of Family. And it's a great piece.
So thank you, Carol and Ernie, for all the work that you did on this beautiful book. And I want to say how nice and comforting it is to be among all of you, even though it's virtually, particularly this week when there's been so much sadness in the world. And I'm getting great comfort from being together with you. So it won't surprise any of you that know Peter that he, ahead of this talk, did make a few suggestions to those of us who were going to speak about, questions that we could answer. And so I actually followed his suggestions. So I'm just going to read through the questions and my answers. So the first question was, what did it mean to you to give the talk when you gave it? So from the moment that Rabbi Peter asked me to speak, and when he told me that the topic was loss, I was immediately touched to my core. More than 25 years had already passed since my most significant loss, which was the loss of both my parents. But Peter sensed the extent to which that and other losses had shaped me and still resonated with me. But what I didn't understand until I started working on the talk was how that loss fit into a sort of a continuum of losses that I had experienced in my family. And I also didn't appreciate the extent to which I had been able to leverage those losses into gains in a way that had actually become a strength and an effective approach for me in my life. So how has the experience, question 2, how has the experience continued to resonate over the years? So I have thought of this talk often, particularly when people close to me have experienced losses. And even if their religious convictions and philosophy of life are different than mine, I feel like I can reach back into the thinking that I developed to find ways to articulate my thinking that in ways that feel really authentic to me. So question number 3, from the standpoint of where you are today, how have your thoughts changed or not? So my thoughts have actually not changed very much since that time. And I attribute that to the very thorough process I went through at the time I wrote the piece, and to the wonderful partnership I experienced with Peter as editor. Peter worked really meticulously with me to be sure that each word and each phrase conveyed exactly what I meant, and that the overall message really resonated with my beliefs. He pushed me to think about how my losses shaped my connection to humanistic Judaism and what choices we have in the face of loss. And he helped me evolve my thinking in a really sophisticated and meaningful way. And so my thinking truly forward. And that thinking has stood the test of time and has guided me through many years since the time I gave the talk. And so finally, the last question, what does it mean to you to be included in this book? So when I first came to City Congregation for a high holiday service, which is now quite a long time ago, it must be 20 years ago, close to 20 years ago, the talks by congregants stood out to me as something highly unusual and very special. They were deep, they were authentic, they were personal, they were funny, and they were poignant. And I was like immediately drawn in. And over the years, I've been touched by so many of these talks. And I think it was a wonderful idea to publish them and to bring them together. And they represent an impressive body of work. And they're a fitting tribute not only to the authors, but also to Rabbi Peter as the editor, who set the tone for these talks and kept all of us writers and speakers sort of honest with ourselves and authentic. And finally, they are a reflection of the congregation as a whole, which created such a supportive and accepting environment for all of us. So, thank you.
Thank you. That was great. What we're going to do now is anybody can comment, and here's how we're going to do that. Please use the raise hand function. Don't just wave, because there's 3 screens on my computer. It might be different on other people's. Use the raise hand. Dahlia is also going to keep an eye out, so if anyone is waving frantically, she'll let us know. But if you want to say something, you know where it is. I'm sure you mostly do. It's under reactions at the bottom of your screen. You just click raise hand, and then you'll pop up to the top of it and I'll know you want to speak, okay? So please, the floor is open. Amy Golden. And Amy, you have to unmute, but also let me say, we appreciate having your art in the book and your writing,
Right.
but also
There
your
you go.
art.
Thank you. I've unmuted. Okay. Well, this has been wonderful. I don't normally come to Shabbat services because I'm so busy, but I thought, I'm going to come to this. It's great to be in the book, but I have to say I have such memories of being asked by Peter to do a speech for Rosh Hashanah, something about, identity and sense of self. I don't remember what the exact thing was, but I remember for years I was saying, I know how to write. Why doesn't Peter ask me? Why doesn't Peter ask me? But of course I couldn't say, hey, Peter, I know how to write. You wouldn't know that. But when he finally asked me, I was so excited. I threw everything into it. And I wanted to be, heard. And I was very, very honest. And then when I stood up there, I thought, oh my God, this is so, I started to talk and I realized that it was so personal. I had just turned myself inside out. I practically passed out on the spot, but I got through it. And it just like the other writers were saying, was such an amazing experience to get the chance to not just write something like you'd write in a journal for yourself, but to know that other people that you care about are going to hear it and that it's going to be meaningful. And I still think it's one of the best pieces of writing that I've done because I did work so hard on it. So I want to thank Peter for asking me and for trusting me to be able to do this and for all the responses I got. I don't really care whether it's published or not, but just being able to have written it and speak to the congregation meant so much to me. So I'm just thrilled as can be.
Thank you. I see Dahlia.
Yeah, so I just want to say what everyone said resonated, but particularly what Dan said about forcing me to be honest. When I started to write about integrity and think about what integrity means, it forced me to think about ways that I realized maybe I don't have integrity and really stretch that. And it is like writ large, a lot of what we do at High Holidays every year. I also just want to add, it's really wonderful to see virtually people here I haven't seen in a while.
I see Kevin and Rachel. I don't know which one of you wants to speak. And then Peter Mona is next.
Yeah. Hey, it was me. So 3 quick things. One, it's lovely to see people's faces and without masks. And it's a real strong reminder of how dear this congregation has been to us and how dear individuals here are. And I just want to say that. And two, in my work in education and all, there's Mr. Rogers is one of my heroes, and he has a wonderful line where he says, you can't help but love someone once you've heard their story. And I suspect that as Daniel alluded to in the last few years, some of those people become harder to hear their stories, but overall it's a sentiment that I value. And piggybacking on what Kevin had said, when Peter had invited him, when we were looking for a synagogue, we were shopping for a congregation, when we kind of realized, oh, our son is now 11, maybe we should, do something. We looked around a lot, and it was really a wonderful fluke that we had found City Congregation, but we looked around a lot, and often we were met with stories that I know many of you already know, where they would say, oh, of course you're all welcome. Of course we're inclusive. I mean, Kevin can't come to the Bema, but, and I was like, I don't know, that kind of doesn't feel all that inclusive to me. And of course, City Congregation, it really is just the opposite. And then, just as Kevin had said, when Peter invited him to speak, it moved me so deeply, because it just felt like we as a family were welcome. It wasn't, with any buts or asterisks. And so I've always been, very fond of Peter anyway, you, Peter. But I was also very deeply touched at that generous sentiment, because it really, really welcomed all of us and meant the world. So thank you. And thank you again. The book is truly beautiful. I know we're not supposed to judge books by their covers, but if I were to judge this one by the cover, I would open it right away. It's so lovely, and keep it on my coffee table so everybody can enjoy it. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Peter M. and then Sam.
I'm very glad to follow Rachel, a fellow Emerson College alumni. She always reminds me, and I always forget that. I have a couple of quick things. This was quite amazing. One of the main things that's been alluded to, it's not only looking and see what the congregation is, but also seeing people who are not with the congregation anymore, alive, and then revisit people we lost. And as Renee always said, they weren't lost, they died. Speaking of being accurate. And so with a lot of these stories of people that are not alive anymore, it made them come back to life, to revisit them. And it was great. And I think it was very effective. And I'm hopeful we all feel that way of some of the people. On a quirky note for a question answered anytime, I know the title Contemplation is great umbrella. Were there a couple of titles, Carol, Ernie, or Peter, that, because you go through pages, you go, that's the title, that takes it all. And of course, Contemplation was the ultimate decision. Were there any alternate titles to kind of kick around? I'm talking about the process, and I'll leave it to all those thoughts to you to answer.
There were, but I can't remember. Ernie, can you remember? I mean, we were looking for something like Contemplation, something like sort of big and serious, but I can't remember actually.
Actually, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I came up with the title, and I was sort of spinning it off of Sherwin Wine's book, Celebration, which was a book of services and readings. And I thought celebration, contemplation, it's a theme that we can keep going with. And obviously, Peter, I think you're absolutely right that it's an umbrella title that fits everything.
Sam?
I want to say a couple of things. We've been through this crazy couple of years, and now there's this war and the planet is dying. And it is so wonderful to feel this sense of connection with all of you. And I keep thinking, I look at the screen and I go through the, what are they called? Tiles, right? And I think like, oh my God, so Peter and I met through the congregation. Now our kids are at college together. I look at this person, I think, oh, well, I run into her in my neighborhood all the time. But we're not sort of a typical congregation where we meet, every week somewhere and we have a, permanent home. So, but the sense of connection is very strong and permanent. And what I love about this book is I feel like it really braids us all together. Like it really intertwines all of us. It intertwines our values as humanistic Jews, our value of books and the written word and questioning and thinking. And I felt very grateful to be included. And I feel very warm about this. And I hope that I'm very thankful to Peter for envisioning it and, funding it. And to Carol and Ernie for really, as I work as a professional editor and proofreader, like boundless free work, it's not easy. And I think it's a testament. It's a testament to the congregation and to the strength of us as a group of people who've come together in this weird little sect, for want of a better word, but we really have the same vision and thoughtfulness about our lives. And it really touched me. The book just touches me. That's all.
Thank you. Estelle. You have to unmute, Estelle. Click
Here
the
we go. I'm unmuted. Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be in the midst of, without being in the midst of all of you. It's again that whole thing, you can tap on the screen, but it's not a person. And you used the word braid, Sam, and that's exactly what happened with me. First of all, I was honored that I was asked if I would permit the use of the two pieces that were selected. And I knew there had to be change in one of them because it was just far too personal and it would be too identifying. So I appreciated that I was able to do that and still have something left. But this came about when there was COVID. So I was dealing with having had early case of COVID when you couldn't get a test and you couldn't, you basically started, what you did is you started thinking about your mortality. If I can't find out if I'm alive, well, do I need to update my will immediately and so on and et cetera. And the other braiding was that there were some changes that I really had to make in my life in terms of aging. And to accept the fact that I was older, because people would always say, oh, you don't look that age, you don't look that age. But it sort of comes out in different ways. You can begin to feel that way. And so I'm grateful because this served an ongoing living therapeutic function for me, that when I had to think about certain things that were very difficult for me to think about, that I was already thinking about, and trying to figure out how I might want to resolve something with someone or whatever, this essay comes along and I have to sit here and say, oh, all right, how much do I reveal about that? And then I read other essays and I read Helene's essay and I say, gee, I wish I knew her better. She said something that I've experienced also. I didn't know that anyone else in the congregation might have. So this book is very, very, very special. And no one mentioned that the book feels good. If you touch the cover, the front and the back, it's soft. It's like it's a gentle book. It's a big book. It's almost the size of my 5 books of Moses, not the Haftarah, the Tanakh. I'm forgetting what to say, what the name of it is. And they could be next to each other on the shelf. I think that was kind of funny, but this is really in a world of its own. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank Ernie for putting up with whatever it was I was going through, but I was able to have the time to just integrate what was going on in my life. And that was a real surprise to me because I didn't know that different things were going to happen. So anyhow, thank you all. And Carol, you were very dear when you said, that you thought it was good that I said, yes, you can use the work that I had done. So I wish us all the best in these crazy, crazy times. And there's a prayer about democracy. And I took a screenshot of it. I don't know if anybody would want to see it, but it's quite moving and quite touching. So thanks again. And I'm sure I'll be seeing you at some point somewhere along the line here. So Peter, thank you also.
Did anyone else want to speak? I don't see any other hands. No.
Sybil is raising her hand or trying to activate
Okay,
it.
Sybil, thank you. I don't see Sybil. Sybil, speak. You probably have to unmute.
Yes, there we go. Okay. Unlike everybody else who spoke, I'm not in the book. I guess I was always too shy to speak in front of you all. But I'm part of the congregation, and to me that's a bigger thing. And I want to thank all of the people who are in the book for all of their talks. Whenever I heard a talk at High Holidays or one of your panels, I was so moved, so enriched, and marveled at the openness and the trust that the speakers showed to all of us. And I always came away feeling closer to people who I didn't know before. I suddenly felt I knew. Reading the book, again, I feel closer to people. I feel that I'm meeting people that I never knew before, an invaluable, beautiful thing. And so I thank you, certainly you and Ernie, and of course, Peter, for making all of this happen. And all of the speakers, all of the people who weren't too shy to get up and open up in front of a crowd. So thank you all, and it's a wonderful accomplishment. It's a treasure, and I so much appreciate what each of you have done.
Trudy. Unmute.
I thought I was hitting the space bar, but anyway, first of all, I definitely want to thank you and Ernie for your incredible efforts and really good work. And of course, I want to thank Peter, whose face I am really happy to see tonight. And I wanted to just share my experience, which was that while it was really gratifying to see my work in a book, I also, when I was reading other people's work, especially work I hadn't seen because it was sort of prior to me, or from things that I hadn't been to, I was like, damn, I wish I had done this, or I wish I'd reached deeper or been less flip or more. So I had that experience. I just sort of wanted the chance to do it again or take a topic that was more demanding in a way of me. So that was just something I wanted to share. But the thing I most wanted to share was that how really, really much it means to me to see all of you, and how I almost didn't realize how much this community means to me, because I've gotten so used to the isolation and a little too comfortable in it. And I haven't been to that many Shabbats, but I'm just really glad to see everybody and to see your whole faces. So yeah, just wanted to share that. So thank you for pulling this particular Shabbat together.
I don't see any more hands. Peter, do you want to say anything, like sort of after hearing all this?
Well, I think I would just like to thank everybody for tuning in, first of all. It's nice to have all of you here. I'm glad to be here. Myrna's over there in a little sideways, so we don't talk to each other. And it's very heartwarming, to hear everybody's memories of their experiences that they share with me when they did, and also as you've done tonight, as you relive it. I know some people said I remember exactly where I was and almost what I was wearing that day when I gave the speech, and then of course, many of you, I'm sure, remember how many people came up to you afterwards, and wanted to talk to you, and find out more and commiserate or share stories. I do have to give Carol an extra shout out, just to make the record straight, that she was the editor for all of this, I believe, papers. I didn't see any of those before they were done. I had my hand with the high holidays, but Carol really did the work on all those initially, and then some of the rewrites or the tweaks. So that's very much something I want to make sure that everybody understands. And the last thing I just want to say is that there are more copies available. And I'll make the pitch. If you want to get another copy, contact the office, make a donation, give one to your children, whatever, your relatives, people that you want to introduce to the congregation. This is a great vehicle to do that. I hope also one last comment for all the new members who I don't know who are here tonight. It's really nice to meet you in this fashion. And I hope and recognize that you're the next generation of the congregation, who will carry on. And obviously you've heard how many people who have been here for 20 plus years. It's overwhelming to Myrna and myself, I'm sure, to know how many people have stuck with us, because you wanted to, because it wasn't just because your kids were there. You know, they aged out, you stayed. And that's what real community is about, and the strength of it. I guess I don't have any other wise things to say, except to thank you all for being here. I'll just finish with one remark. Louise asked me at the start, I don't know if you were still on, Louise, how I was doing health-wise. You know, I've been battling pancreatic cancer for a year and a half already. Had chemo, surgery. It's spread, so I'm back on chemo again. It's an ordeal, but you know, the book was a major piece to kind of give me a project work on with Carol and Ernie for a long time, for the last year. So really nice thing to have that for us. And you know, I have all the love of all of you and the support. And you know, I hope we'll have another occasion to meet like this. You know, maybe I have another book, which I told you at the outset, that I'm hoping will come out hopefully in the next few months, and we can maybe talk about that. So I will just give you a clicking to everybody in the congregation as they do, or applause, and thank you for being here for us and for the book. And Shabbat Shalom.